Starry Sky Iray is a different way to render stars in space. To demonstrate the loader files for the product, I'd like to point out that I prefer to use a custom scene file as my new scene, as well as the default scene when I open Daz Studio. I have a preferred set of HDR images, and having this one already loaded gives me quick access to that folder. This base scene also contains my usual animation render settings, which is how I normally like to begin working in Daz Studio. So now let's take a look at Starry Sky Iray. Environments, Darkening, then click on Starry Sky Iray. Starry Sky Iray subset will load the full system without changing any of the render or scene settings, so my preferred default setup is still fully intact, which truly is my preferred method of working. As we can see, however, for this to look like space, we need to turn off Iray's ground floor. Like so. Let's load in a primitive sphere. We can see that the HDR lighting is having an effect on the sphere. If we do the same thing inside the full scene version of Starry Sky Iray, we get much less light on the sphere. This can also have a really nice effect for many applications. Now, the reason it's so dark, for one, the Iray Sun Sky environment is set up with an intensity of 0.00. Lifting this value will brighten the entire scene. However, it doesn't brighten it nearly as much as we'd expect it to. By default, Starry Sky Iray loads with this outer space sphere, which is black, but it's also completely refractive, but with a dark refraction color. This allows some of the light to pass through, but in a very subdued way. When we turn the outer space sphere off, we immediately see the difference. By lowering the intensity of the Iray Sun Sky, we can bring it right back down to nearly where we just were. Let's look at another option. We'll load in a fresh version of Starry Sky Iray full scene version. We'll bring our sphere back in so we can see what's going on. Now let's add this third file, your SS Iray Ghost Lighting. The SS Iray Ghost Lighting rig attempts to create a sort of an HDRI-like lighting with the space scene. Switching to texture shaded view, we can see the light shapes themselves. They're really big, so I'll select these two and target them. There's a lot of stars in the scene, but in truth, we're not actually seeing our primitive sphere anymore. It's that tiny compared to these ghost lights. Target our sphere and look around. we see the ghost lights all around us. Selecting the whole rig, we can easily rotate, position, and scale the whole set. Now let's load in a fresh Starry Sky Iray full scene. Turning features off, we see this top star field, Earth-like constellations. Not scientifically accurate, but they do look familiar. Extra solar patterns is here to give us a different look, as if we're on a different planet or moon, or in a different solar system altogether. We can also have both on, which is the default when the product first loads. The inner star field consists of literally thousands of stars of varying size and color that are clustered together to create regions of dark space in between them as they flow spherically around the scene at varying distances from the center of the scene. The outer star field consists of thousands of stars of varying size, color, and distance from the center, but are much more evenly spread throughout space with a more subtle clustering. Each star within the star field is assigned one of 5 specific materials, and that's it. This makes it simple to alter the appearance of all of the stars in the sky. These main surfaces are star B, blue hue, star yellow, yellow hue, star red, red hue, and star dim, white hue. Star 5 is the same as star dim, but is for hero stars and is much more bright. By design, we can select all of the star fields and change, say, star R into something entirely different for all of the fields, or just this one or that. We can change it up in any way we want, and it will only affect the stars assigned to that particular surface for that particular selected star field. So only having the 5 surface materials makes it easy to manage this many stars. In the Starry Sky Iray's materials, we can set the star field materials back to their defaults. Constellations and patterns star fields can be made brighter with the constellations and patterns A, while B brings them back to default. Inner star field has its own material preset, as does outer star field, allowing us the freedom to experiment with different settings all we like. As I've mentioned before, the outer space sphere is meant to darken the scene to near black, yet allowing some light to come through via refraction. The nebula has its own luminosity based on its color map and luminosity settings. Provided are 4 material presets for varying degrees of brightness. Let's turn Iray back on so we can see. Nebula Faint is meant to make the nebula barely visible, just to add some subtle texture to the space scene. Default is somewhat bright, but still fairly subdued. 2 more brighter presets can make the nebula more of a hero in the scene, and we can always further change the nebulosity and other emission settings for more custom effects. Here's what Constellations and Patterns A does to our Earth-like constellations. It really makes them stand out, which adds a lot of flexibility for different types of scenes. Constellations and Patterns B brings them back to default, which is a nice, colorful setting for our hero stars in the sky. We can also load individual parts of the system. Perhaps all we want is to have some constellations in the sky. Maybe just the dainty clusters of the inner star field. Or maybe the gentle scattering from the outer star field. The nebula object is quite simple by design. It's just meant to add a little extra detail to what might be an otherwise black backdrop. There are 3 morph dials to change things up a bit. Stretch, further, closer, and curve more. Similarly, we can also add the ghost lights individually as well. Though I always prefer to work with the full rig, but different situations call for different measures, right? Let's load in my Kit Bash starship. Aha! We see that when I made this subset, I included the render settings. That's fine. So now we have a different HDRI, and we're no longer using the Iray Sun Sky environment. Turning Iray back on, we're getting the full effect of both the HDRI and the ghost lights. And I still have Starry Sky Iray turned off. For now, let's get rid of the ghost lights. And turn Starry Sky Iray back on. We're still getting the full effect of the HDRI because we still have our outer space sphere turned off. Most of the time, this is how I like to work, rendering what would be the darkness of space into the alpha channel as transparent. Then I can add anything I want for the background. Often just black, but it could be literally any backdrop, image, or sequence. Check out what happens when we turn the outer space sphere back on. We're still getting some of the effect from the HDRI dome, but not much. When we render like this, however, our outer space will be much darker against our backdrop. We can see that when I saved my starship subset, I've saved the environment intensity at the low value of 0.34. We can counter the effect of the outer space sphere's darkness by increasing this value. Because of the refraction of the outer space sphere, we're still seeing a dark background while also letting some of the environmental lighting to come through. By cranking the environment's intensity upwards of 7 or 8, we get fairly close to the full effect of the HDRI, and our background is still really dark, but there is still some alpha transparency in the rendered image. As we can see when we make the environment dome visible. By deleting all of my render settings from the scene pane, the environment's dome map reverts to the original map that opens with Daz Studio's default. To get back to the render settings from Starry Sky Iray's full scene load, we can come to the Iray lighting options. Sun Sky Iray Lighting 000 provides that default setting. For an effect similar to what we get from HDRI lighting, we can simply load in your SS Iray ghost lights. However, much easier than manipulating the various rotation angle of an HDRI, the ghost lighting rig can be rotated with ease using our standard rotation tools in Daz Studio. The easiest way to look at the entirety of Starry Sky Iray. Select one of the Starfields and target it, like so. Starry Sky Iray provides a lot of options for space scenes. Each dome within the system can be manipulated individually. The full system is centered at 0x, 0y, and 0z, so rotating on any or all axes will make for some interesting ways to view space. The easiest way to get our camera back into the center is to create a new null and target that. Bam! Now we're seeing how cool this can be. Angle the whole thing with a rotation on the z-axis and then rotate it along y, and we get those iconic time-lapse renders of the night sky. Turning off various features can allow us to really customize the look of our space scenes. We could simply add another inner star field from our library, or we can simply make an instance of the one we already have. It's truly magnificent how much we can alter the look. To help you get started, there are also several example scenes included for you to inspect, use, or just mess around with. The first one is a fun method of animating space travel. We have a filming camera, and then we have this group containing a horrible little low-poly spaceship I dropped into it. It performs a pretty cool little animation of space travel. Let's check out how it's set up. Looking at it from out here, we can see that it's actually space that's moving, not the ship. And it's not even actually moving, but rotating around. I also added 2 instances of the Nebula. Sometimes when we rotate the actual camera during an animation, the in-betweens will turn out to be something that we did not really expect. So instead, I parent the camera to a null and rotate the null along the animation timeline. Works like a charm. Okay, instead of this horrible stand-in ship, let's load something cool. How about Kiboretto's shuttle star? And we'll spin it around a bit, drop it into the starship group. Bam! Animated starship, just like that. More scene examples. Let's check out this alien world preset. Now, instead of just zooming in on a null, let's load in a scene that would look cool with this kind of sky. Ah, yes. DZ Fire's Forsaken Village will be perfect, I think. Now we can see the overall scale of Starry Sky Iray compared to a rather large scenery set like this. Let's grab a camera. It's pretty dark with the outer space sphere turned on. But instead of turning it off, let's try the ghost lighting. Even without changing a thing, this is looking pretty cool. Dramatic. The example scene, Sun is a nearby star, uses the actual sun from the Iray sun sky system to create a nearby star, moon, or planet. It's just using various sun sky settings to come up with this effect. This is a great way to come up with all kinds of different looks depending on the type of scene you're looking for. Stellar Nursery does a similar thing, but reducing the Iray sun to become one of the stars within the nebula. Twilight is like Alien World, but again, using different sun sky settings for the look. Those are actually going to open a whole new scene. But what about using Starry Sky Iray with existing scenes? For example, we'll load in the massive medieval lands scene. And let's give it one of its lighting presets. That just looks cool. Let's load the Starry Sky Iray subset and give it a sky. Really dark, right? Turning off the outer space sphere is the quickest way to change that. But, oh look, this scene is bigger than Starry Sky Iray. Well, all it takes is a little nudge in the scale field. Bam! Now, what if we want to use the lighting from one of the example scenes? Instead of loading the whole scene and starting all over again, just go to the Iray lighting and load the environmental settings from there. Now is where we might want to turn our outer space sphere back on. There are many ways to change the brightness of the scene. Adding the ghost light rig to this scene, we might be tempted to take the pains of moving the lights around for different effects. Because this definitely doesn't look right. Remember when we had to scale up Starry Sky Iray? Let's try similar scale factors to this ghost lighting rig. Not bad for such a quick solution. Starry Sky Iray will also launch with its first add-on product, Nebulous Wonders. Nebulous Wonders is designed to completely immerse the whole scene inside a nebula-like environment. Let's take a look. For starters, we have the main product folder within Starry Sky Iray, Nebulous Wonders. In here, we find 14 new scenes to start with. Nebulous Wonders A scenes apply the new nebulosity dome to the Iray environment dome, as well as applying the same map to the outer space sphere in both refraction color and emission color. They all also load without the nebula prop since we're now completely surrounded by nebula. Turning off the outer space sphere, we can often see that the environment is brighter than the emission of the stars, causing a bit of dark matter sort of look. The main scenes load in using the same maps for the environment as the sphere, but presets allow us to mix and match all we want. Here, I'm only applying the new effects to the outer space sphere, while the Iray environment dome and settings remain untouched. We can also do the opposite Here, we're loading the new effects only to Iray's environment dome. Nebulous Wonders B scenes load with the effect in Iray's environment dome using Starry Sky Iray's default dark outer space sphere for a more subtle effect. For individual changing of these sorts of settings, simply use the materials preset of the main Starry Sky Iray to set the material for the outer space sphere, and change the environment sphere through Nebulous Wonders render settings. So, in a nutshell, that's it. Starry Sky Iray and the Starry Sky Iray Nebulous Wonders add-on pack. Have fun exploring the many possibilities of exploring space, rendering stars into your existing scenes, and just having fun with a whole new way of rendering stars in Daz Studio. I hope you enjoy the ride.